What happens when a child is born into greatness but never asked if he wanted the weight that comes with it? That is the hidden story of Trunks, specifically Kid Trunks in Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super. Because behind the confidence, the talent, and even the arrogance, there's a deeper psychological reality most people overlook. Trunks isn't just a gifted child, he's a child born into legacy. And legacy, when placed on young shoulders, doesn't just inspire greatness, it creates pressure, expectation, and often silent trauma. Kid Trunks grows up in a world very different from the one his future counterpart experienced. He is surrounded by wealth, comfort, and privilege, raised as the son of Vegeta, the prince of all Saiyans, and Bulma, one of the most brilliant minds on Earth. From the outside, his life looks perfect. But psychologically, this environment creates a unique kind of tension. Because when you are born into greatness, you are not given the freedom to be average. You are expected to live up to something before you even understand what it means. This is where the concept of inherited identity begins. Trunks doesn't start life asking, "Who am I?" Instead, the world tells him who he should be. Strong like Vegeta, brilliant like Bulma, a warrior, a prodigy, a leader. And when a child is constantly measured against powerful figures, their sense of self becomes externally defined. They begin to perform rather than explore. They don't discover their identity, they inherit it. And what makes this even more complex is Trunks' natural talent. Unlike many characters who struggle to grow stronger, Trunks excels quickly. He becomes a Super Saiyan at a very young age, something that took warriors like Goku years of intense emotional and physical struggle to achieve. But here's the psychological twist. When success comes too easily, it can disconnect you from the value of effort. Trunks begins to see strength not as something earned, but as something expected. And that expectation feeds into a subtle form of arrogance. But that arrogance is not rooted in confidence. It's rooted in unconscious pressure. Because deep down, Trunks knows he's supposed to be great. And when greatness is expected of you, failure becomes something you can't afford. So instead of embracing challenges as opportunities to grow, you start avoiding situations that might expose your limits. This is why Trunks often appears playful, even careless. It's not just immaturity, it's a defense mechanism. If he treats everything like a game, then failure doesn't feel as real. His dynamic with Goten reinforces this behavior. Together, they represent childhood freedom, laughter, competition, and adventure. But even within that friendship, you can see traces of comparison and ego. They push each other, challenge each other, but rarely confront deeper emotional realities. Because neither of them has been forced to fully face consequence. And without consequence, growth remains incomplete. However, Trunks' story becomes far more meaningful when you contrast him with his future self, future Trunks. While Kid Trunks grows up in comfort, future Trunks grows up in devastation. A world destroyed, constant fear, loss at every turn. And that difference reveals a powerful truth about human development. Struggle shapes identity in ways comfort cannot. Future Trunks carries trauma, but that trauma gives him clarity, discipline, and a deep sense of responsibility. Kid Trunks, on the other hand, carries expectation without understanding its weight. And this is where the theme of responsibility becomes critical. Responsibility is not something you can truly understand until you are forced to carry it. For Kid Trunks, responsibility is still an idea, not a lived experience. He knows he's strong, he knows he comes from powerful lineage, but he hasn't yet been placed in a situation where everything depends on him. And until that moment comes, his growth remains potential rather than reality. There's also a deeper layer when we look at his relationship with Vegeta. Vegeta is not an emotionally expressive father. His love is not shown through words or affection. It's shown through expectation and challenge. He pushes Trunks to be stronger, tougher, better. But what's missing is emotional guidance. And this creates a common psychological gap in many high-expectation environments. The child learns how to perform, but not how to process. They learn how to win, but not how to understand themselves. This lack of emotional grounding can lead to identity confusion later in life. Because when your value is tied to performance, you begin to ask dangerous questions. Who am I if I'm not the strongest? Who am I if I fail? And if those questions go unanswered, they can create internal instability. This is why many gifted individuals struggle not with success, but with meaning. They achieve, but they don't feel fulfilled. They perform, but they don't feel secure. What makes Trunks' journey so important is that he stands at the intersection of two paths. One path leads to comfort, ego, and untested potential. The other leads to struggle, responsibility, and transformation. And the difference between those paths is not talent, it's experience. It's whether or not he is willing to face challenges that force him to grow beyond the identity he was given. Because true strength is not inherited, it's developed. Legacy can open doors, but it cannot walk through them for you. And responsibility is not something you can avoid forever. Eventually, life will present a moment where you are no longer the child playing the game. You are the one responsible for the outcome. Kid Trunks represents a phase that many people go through, even outside of anime. The phase where you have potential, but haven't been tested. Where you have identity handed to you, but haven't questioned it. Where you have the ability to be great, but haven't yet decided what greatness means to you. And that phase is dangerous, because it can create the illusion that you're already enough, when in reality, you're just getting started. The real transformation begins when Trunks starts to understand that strength is not just about power, it's about responsibility. It's about discipline. It's about showing up when things are no longer fun or easy. And most importantly, it's about choosing who you become, rather than blindly following who you are expected to be. Because at the end of the day, legacy is not something you carry, it's something you redefine. And responsibility is not a burden, it's a test. A test that reveals whether you are living as a reflection of others, or as the creator of your own identity. Kid Trunks hasn't fully faced that test yet, but when he does, everything will change.